we're joined on the line right now by another very special guest, Frank Gaffney. He's the president of the Center for Security Policy. Frank, thanks for joining us this morning on Breitbart News Daily.
Great to be with you, Matt. Thank you.
So the White House yesterday rolled out President Trump's new National Vetting Center to screen through immigrants and foreign travelers coming into the United States. And I know your Secure Freedom Minute syndicated radio commentary out today walks through maybe some concerns with that. So I wanted to see if you can walk through for us what it is that President Trump has rolled out with this new National Vetting Center, and then maybe we can get into some of the things that he has to make sure that it does.
Sure. This is, as you know, Matt, the natural result of something the president talked about in the campaign, that we have a problem bringing people into this country who may wish to do us harm. We're not the only ones, of course. We've watched this play out in Europe and other countries that have taken in large populations from nations that have predominantly a tradition in Islam known as Sharia. And according to Sharia, not all Muslims embrace this, but according to Sharia, it is the duty of a faithful Muslim to try through violent techniques where possible and through stealth where not to achieve that doctrine's triumph over the policies and so on of the home state. And the president has said, look, this is, in his words, in the campaign, he called it radical Islamic terrorism. We have to make sure that we're not, these are my words, but the gist of it was, we're not importing more of these terrorists. We don't want more of them in. So he went, when he came to office, as we all recall, to great lengths to try to create a pause in the immigration of people from several countries, 7 originally, 6 subsequently, that President Obama had identified as problematic, and that ran into all kinds of problems in the courts. As you know, the Supreme Court eventually more or less said he could do it. But in the meantime, what we have seen is this continuation of people coming in from these countries, and without an vetting of any kind, it seems, or certainly the extreme vetting that he promised us. So I think the national vetting enterprise, as he calls it, is supposed to fill that gap. And there's a new memorandum, a presidential memorandum that's come out just yesterday, I believe, saying, you know, this is how it's going to be set up, and these are the people who are going to be working there, and so is going to run it, and so is going to be responsible for, you know, overseeing it. And importantly, there's going to be a sort of task force or a group that's going to be monitoring civil liberties and civil rights to make sure that all of this is consistent with, well, it sounds like it's going to be consistent with sort of the Obama approach to all of this, which is to say, you know, folks sort of asserting certain liberties, certain rights are going to trump our sensible national security practices. And that's especially so, Matt, I'm afraid, because there doesn't seem to be some kind of thought being given, or at least some sort of guidance being given, to making sure that we understand who are the people we're trying to keep out. And just very quickly, a number of colleagues of mine and I sent into the Supreme Court an amicus brief back when it was considering all of these immigration pauses and so on. And it simply said, look, if you're trying to screen people that you don't want in the country, as we did in the past, we said we don't want Nazis. We don't want communists. Well, we shouldn't want and shouldn't introduce into this country more Sharia supremacists. And that's unfortunately something we've already got too many of. And I hope that filter will be applied in the new national vetting enterprise.
And can you walk through for us in the amicus brief that you guys filed with the Supreme Court? How do you screen out these Sharia supremacists? How do you keep them from coming into the country? I mean, it seems like it should be a pretty straightforward process where you, in interviews with these people, just ask them straightforward questions, and then you look into their backgrounds and so on and so forth. And all of that is legitimate for a country to do when they're making a determination whether or not they want to bring in somebody from a foreign country. I mean, what is the process that our immigration agents should go through? And that our government should go through when vetting these folks?
It's a great question, Matt. And obviously it would have to be, worked through to make it national policy. But I think we've got to do that. And it is like the kind of questioning and the kind of background investigations and so on that you would do to make sure you weren't bringing in communists or Nazis in the past. You'd, of course, ask them a series of questions. Now, one of the things that makes this trickier is that there is actually, under Sharia, not only the opportunity, the latitude, shall we say, there is an obligation to lie for the faith. In Arabic, this term is called taqiyya. So you have to expect some of that, but you nonetheless, if you make this the standard, you nonetheless have something to investigate against. You have, the opportunity to look for their own behavior, their own family's behavior or ties, their associations with groups that promote this kind of program, mosques for that matter, and that gives you some evidence that if they do lie, and on the basis of those lies, you let them in, you find out that they are, in fact, behaving in this fashion, then you can deport them. But better yet, you can keep them from coming in the first place. But you have to set it as a standard, and that's what's a little worrying, is that doesn't seem to be in the mix at the moment, and we very much need it, because otherwise, what are you vetting for? Is it just that they are manifesting specific behavior that shows that they are prone to terrorism? Well, you should do that, of course, but that's not the entirety of the problem. The Muslim Brotherhood, as we've talked about many times, Matt, the Muslim Brotherhood is a group that has been very, very active in our country as well as elsewhere. Much of what it does is what I call pre-violent, not actually engaging in terrorism, though they're perfectly willing to do that, but setting the stage for it. They're building mosques, they're building front groups, they're building infrastructure. They are developing cohorts that will engage in violence at some point. Those are folks you want to screen out too, and Sharia supremacism as a filter can help you do that.
Now, another thing I got to ask you about, Frank, is, with the release of this Nunes memo that came out from the House Intelligence Committee, and now new details coming out last night from this Grassley and Graham memo in the U.S. Senate on dossier author Christopher Steele. Apparently, he lied to the FBI. This whole FISA court process is really stinking to high heaven. I think the mask is slipping off of what happened in the lead up to the presidential election in 2016. What do you make of everything that's happening with the memos that are flying around? Now we get a Democrat memo that's coming down the pike this week. What do you think of everything that's come out about this whole different thing? Where do you think this goes? It seems like there's a big picture here where the process significantly broke down, and maybe our law enforcement was abused for political purposes, not by Trump people, but the other way around, by the Clinton people and the Obama people.
Matt, I think you put your finger on it. It's unfortunately not just our law enforcement capabilities and powers of the state, which are quite considerable. It's also our intelligence capabilities and powers, which are also considerable. I'm a national security minded guy and have long supported and been, rather insistent that we need capabilities like those that the FISA court can authorize to engage in surveillance, to engage in monitoring of signals intelligence and the like. There have been a lot of my friends and our friends, Matt, who have said, well, this is rife with the potential, at least, for abuse. What I think we've been seeing unmistakably in what information has been trickling out, memoranda here, referral letter there, and the background investigative reporting that's been going on in Breitbart and Sarah Carter's terrific work, for example, at Fox, is there have been abuses. And it seems as though what they have amounted to is the weaponization for naked political purposes of these law enforcement powers of the state, of these intelligence capabilities of the state, to achieve a certain end. And the end was initially, I think now pretty unmistakably, to try to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. And even more so, once he became president during his transition and even the early months of this administration, it seemed as though there was an effort being made to sabotage his presidency, to hamstring him with this threat that he'd been colluding with the Russians, and that was going to be investigated, and it was going to stop him and maybe even remove him from office. This is an ugly thing, and particularly for those of us who believe we need these powers, if we don't get to the bottom of it and make sure they're not being abused, I'm quite certain we'll find sort of the baby out with the bathwater. They will be taken away, and that, I think, could be a real problem for the national security.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I agree with you that we need these powers to root out terrorism, but we need to make sure as well that they aren't used for political purposes. And the question of how we do that, I think, is yet to be answered, and I think it's playing out in front of us over the course of this investigation. Frank, I really want to thank you for joining us this morning on Breitbart News Daily.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Matt.